Another rat crawling out of the slums.
Officer Martinez's words sliced through the quiet of the morning like a knife on the marble steps of the federal courthouse. Early sunlight glanced off the polished brass plaque at the main doors, while a few officers stood with arms folded and a few others lifted their phones to record, as if waiting for cheap entertainment. In that instant, power and arrogance were written all over Martinez's face, a man far too used to bending the truth, crafting himself as the hero and shoving the victim into the role of the aggressor. This morning, he thought he was on the verge of another easy win. The woman he just insulted was Kesha Williams, no judge's robe, no buffer of security, just a simple business outfit and a leather briefcase heavy with case files. On the surface, she was just another vulnerable victim, one more name on the long list of people Martinez had ground under his heel. But he was wrong, because that woman was no rat from the slums. She was Judge Kesha Williams, and in a few minutes the entire courtroom would reel as she reclaimed the seat that had always been hers. That morning, Kesha wasn't wearing her familiar black robe. Dressed simply for work, she climbed the marble steps, a leather briefcase full of files for the day's docket in hand. She didn't even reach the door before she was stopped. Officer Martinez blocked her path, eyes crawling over her with contempt. "Another rat crawling out of the slums," he muttered, and then his hand flashed. His palm cracked across her cheek. Kesha's head snapped to the side, her briefcase flew and papers fanned into the air like confetti in the wind. Before she could recover, his fingers clamped around her throat and slammed her into the courthouse's icy wall. Metal clicked handcuffs biting her wrists, cold as a sentence. Around them, several other officers clustered, laughing, some raising their phones to record as if it were a spectacle. Kesha's cheek throbbed, but her eyes never left the brass plaque on the front door, the Honorable Judge K. Williams presiding. Not 20 feet away was the courtroom where she usually presided, now the place she was being dragged like a criminal. In that moment, every onlooker thought of two words: poetic justice. But life is rarely that simple. Inside, Martinez straightened his uniform collar and cleared his throat. He knew this play by heart, twist the story script himself as the hero and let the system believe him over the victim. Because for generations, the police officer's word weighed more than the word of someone who looked like Kesha. "Your Honor." He began steady and sure. "While conducting a security check, I discovered a suspicious individual attempting to enter a restricted area." All eyes swung to Kesha, now seated at the defense table, wrists cuffed, cheeks swelling purple. Martinez continued, expression blank. The subject failed to produce identification, behaved erratically, and was combative. On the bench sat acting Judge Harrison, a gaunt white man in his 60s. He nodded along, sympathetic. Emboldened, Martinez pressed on. When I approached, she started shouting, cursing, even claimed to be an official to intimidate me. It's a classic tactic with people like that. In the gallery, a few other officers, Rodriguez and Thompson, traded looks. They'd heard this script before, faces changing, story the same. She tried to run and resisted when I had to place her in protective hold. I used only the minimum force necessary for public safety. His words flowed like honey. Only his hand trembled the one tell of strain. The court reporter's keys clacked, memorializing each lie. Behind them, a young female law clerk frowned. Something didn't add up, but the pattern hadn't clicked yet. Officer Rodriguez, the prosecutor Sandra Walsh, called. Rodriguez rose, uniform crisp. "I witnessed the entire incident, Your Honor. The defendant clearly intended to breach security." Officer Martinez acted with professionalism. "And what about the alleged assault?" Judge Harrison asked. Martinez clenched his jaw. "Your Honor, I used only necessary force. Any injury was caused by the subject's resistance." He held up a cell phone, cueing a video, conveniently beginning midway, as if by chance. "Unfortunately, my body cam malfunctioned this morning." "How convenient," Kesha murmured bitterly, smiling her first words. "What was that?" Harrison looked up. "Nothing, Your Honor," Kesha replied evenly, her eyes burning. Martinez pressed on. "This is clearly another attempt to play the victim to escape accountability. She trespassed, carried suspicious documents, then cried racism. In my 15 years on the force, I've seen this too many times. It insults the real victims of discrimination. A few white courthouse staffers nodded. The story sounded familiar, like the nightly news. Pointing at Kesha, Martinez declared, "The defendant claims she was headed to work, but has no paperwork to prove it. It's blatant deceit." Thompson, the third officer, stepped up next, ready to add one more layer to a performance close to its final act. Your Honor, Rodriguez interjected the defendant had confidential legal documents which we suspect relate to identity fraud or impersonation. That perked Harrison up. Fraud. Martinez seized the opening voice, quickening. "Yes, Your Honor. The papers bear official headings, case numbers, and sensitive information. No ordinary citizen should have them." She clearly intended to impersonate a court employee. The room tightened with the absurdity, but Martinez kept going, unaware his every word was tightening a noose around his own neck. "In my professional experience," he concluded, "this is a manipulative stunt. She wants to turn this into a race issue to distract from her actual wrongdoing. It's a well-worn ploy." He cut his eyes at Kesha, simmering with spite. People like her think they can walk into any building courthouse office, and when they're stopped, they cry discrimination. Not my courthouse. The venom drifted like toxic smoke. A few staffers shifted uneasily. Others kept their faces blank. "Your Honor, Prosecutor Walsh interjected the state moves to charge trespass, resisting arrest and assault on a police officer. The defendant's attempt to frame this as a civil rights matter is a desperate defense strategy." Martinez smiled faintly. Everything was landing exactly as he'd planned. One more victory. One more reminder that the system was on his side. To emphasize, he said, "I exercised extraordinary restraint. The defendant appeared unstable, possibly on substances. Another officer might have had to use stronger measures." Judge Harrison nodded gravely. "Your professionalism is noted, Officer Martinez." At the defense table, Kesha sat straight-cuffed hands, resting quietly in her lap. Her face was calm, even serene. Look closer, though, and you'd see the corner of her mouth tilt the tell of silent preparation and an oncoming counterstrike. While Martinez assumed he'd already won, he didn't realize he was testifying in front of the one woman with the power to end his career. "Anything further?" Harrison asked. Martinez squared his shoulders. "Only this society needs strong law enforcement. Some people only understand authority when it's backed by force. And today the defendant learned that actions have consequences. No one suspected those words would become the bitter prophecy of his downfall." The prosecutor smiled, satisfied. "Your Honor, the state rests. The evidence clearly establishes the defendant's criminal conduct in defiance of the law." Martinez stepped down, throwing Kesha a cocky wink of seal on what he thought was a foregone win. It was the last triumphant gesture of his entire career. "The defendant may address the court," Harrison said, expecting a perfunctory plea. Kesha rose slowly, the cuffs clinking, bruised cheek, rumpled clothes. But when she spoke, the room shifted. Authority rolled off her, forcing people to re-examine themselves. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said, voice crisp, resonant, heavy with true power. Harrison blinked, surprised by the timbre. This was no weak plea for mercy. "First," Kesha said, sweeping the room with her gaze, "I want to correct inaccuracies in Officer Martinez's testimony. I'm accused of trespassing. In fact, I was walking on a public sidewalk approaching the main entrance at 8:47 a.m. She turned to Harrison. "Your Honor, you may recall the Supreme Court's holding in the HGV's Committee for Industrial Organization case. It states clearly that sidewalks adjacent to government buildings are traditional public forums where citizens have the right to be." The court reporter's keys paused. Walsh's face jolted. This wasn't a plea, it was a surgical legal argument. Furthermore, Kesha said evenly, "Martinez alleges I carried suspicious documents implying identity fraud. Please review them." She gestured to the evidence table where her papers had been scooped together in haste. "These are legitimate," Kesha continued, "including pending case files, court memoranda, and administrative correspondence. All fall squarely within the scope of my lawful duties." Duties. Judge Harrison cut in, eyes cool. And what precisely is your occupation, Miss? Kesha paused, a small smile touching her lips. Williams. Dr. Williams. And you'll know the particulars very soon, Your Honor. The concise reply sent a shiver through Martinez. A feeling of dread spread like cold water. If I may continue, Kesha went on steady as someone utterly at home in a courtroom. Officer Martinez claims I shouted obscenities. I invoke the Fifth Amendment regarding any alleged statements, and I state any reaction was the direct result of being unlawfully assaulted without warning and without cause. In the back, the young law clerk sat up straight, rapt. That cadence, those words, they rang familiar. As for the malfunctioning body cam, Kesha's tone hardened to steel. Your Honor is well acquainted with the federal rules of evidence, especially Rule 106, permitting summaries of voluminous material. I believe full video and audio of this morning exist and will be brought before the court. Harrison leaned in. What evidence? This courthouse maintains high-definition security cameras every 16 feet along the entryway, Kesha said. Additionally, all officer body cam data is auto-backed up regardless of device issues. The color drained from Martinez's face. He'd improvised too fast, forgetting the electronic eyes everywhere. I formally move for a preservation order for all surveillance data from 8:45 to 9:05 this morning, including courthouse video body cam backups and any recordings made by officers' phones on scene. Objection. Walsh shot up. The defendant cannot demand discovery without counsel. Kesha's gaze cut to her, and Walsh involuntarily stepped back half a pace. Your Honor, the Sixth Amendment grants a defendant the right to self-representation and to present evidence. Moreover, Brady v. Maryland imposes on the prosecution a duty to preserve and disclose exculpatory evidence. Silence congealed. Everyone understood this was no desperate wail. This was doctrine. Harrison cleared his throat, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Miss Williams, you seem familiar with procedure. Have you had legal training? Kesha kept her voice neutral. I've had some experience with the justice system, Your Honor. But her eyes flashed a confidence impossible to hide. She stepped to the evidence table, the cuffs faintly chiming. I'll also clarify my suspicious presence. This is my daily schedule, indicating I was assigned to appear in this building at 9 a.m. The veteran guard Henderson, more than a dozen years at the courthouse, stiffened. He stared at Kesha, eyes widening. He knew that face, the woman he'd greeted every morning for 3 years. Martinez claims I puffed myself up as important. I did no such thing. I attempted to show ID. He refused to look and attacked me immediately. Kesha swept the room. Your Honor, I still possess documentation proving who I am and why I had every right to be here this morning. Harrison's forehead beaded. What documentation? Deliberately, Kesha reached into her coat pocket. She drew out her judge's parking placard, her chamber access badge, and the leather wallet holding her official ID. Guard Henderson lurched to his feet, face blanching. Oh my God. Your Honor, Kesha said, voice like a bell. It appears there's been a grave misunderstanding about whom Officer Martinez assaulted today. She opened the wallet and held up a card embossed with a gold judicial seal. Even from a distance, it was unmistakable. Perhaps, she continued, voice now carrying the full gravity of the highest seat in the room, we should recess briefly to verify my identity. Harrison stared at the card, then at Kesha's face, then at Henderson, who was nodding miserably. Court will stand in recess for 15 minutes, Harrison croaked, gavel echoing. Martinez froze, heart hammering. The world he thought he controlled was cracking. His familiar game had become a chess match with rules he didn't understand. The hallway buzzed like a lake just struck by a stone. In a small anteroom, Kesha sat calmly, cuff marks still livid on her wrists. Henderson fumbled with a ring of keys, hands shaking. His voice broke. Judge Williams, God forgive me. I didn't recognize you out of robes the way they dragged you. I'm so sorry. Kesha shook her head gently. It's not your fault. But I need you to do something. Anything, Your Honor. Go to my chambers and bring my black robe with the gold trim. And Henderson, she met his eyes, voice firm. Bring the gavel from my swearing in. Henderson bobbed his head and hurried out, leaving Kesha alone with her thoughts. She closed her eyes, drawing a long breath, the same way she'd done for 23 years on the bench. In minutes, the respected judge had been turned into a victim, a defendant, a woman in cuffs by lies. But she knew it was time to take it all back. The phone they'd just returned to her buzzed. Messages flashed from her clerk, Janet Morrison, Judge. "Where are you? Peterson is about to be called. Counsel is getting antsy. Are you okay? Rumors are flying." Kesha typed fast, "Continue, Peterson. Clear my afternoon. There's something more important." She tapped another number, Chief Judge Margaret Carter, head of the entire judicial district. "Kesha, thank God. I heard something happened." "Are you all right? I've been better," Kesha said, voice like steel. "Margaret, I need you to do something right now, no questions. Say the word. I want a preservation order for all surveillance from 8:45 to 9:15 this morning. Every camera, everything. And Margaret, multiple backups in multiple places." A beat. "Kesha, what happened?" Kesha's voice didn't waver. An officer named Martinez just stood in court and swore under oath that he bravely subdued a dangerous intruder. Margaret, that intruder was me. On my way to work, he attacked me, degraded me, called me a filthy animal. Said I belonged in a cage. 30 seconds of frozen silence. Dear God. Kesha, should I call the FBI, DOJ? Not yet. First, we lock down the evidence. And one more thing, pull every case Martinez has testified in over the last 5 years. All of them. Done. But Kesha, you can't preside. Conflict of interest. Margaret, in 10 minutes I'm walking into that courtroom in my robe, and Martinez is going to learn exactly who he put his hands on and what justice actually means. The door swung open. Henderson returned with a garment bag and a wooden box. Your robe and gavel, Judge. Kesha stood and unzipped the bag. The black robe settled across her shoulders, each fold heavy with memory and authority. She lifted the carved gavel, tracing the familiar inscription. Justice is blind, but she sees all. Henderson, she said, adjusting the collar when we returned to court, announce me exactly as always. Yes, Your Honor. How shall I announce you? Kesha straightened every inch the federal judge she'd been for 23 years. The Honorable Judge Kesha Williams presiding. In the small mirror, she took in her own face. The bruise on her cheek wasn't a mark of shame anymore. It was living evidence, proof of rot in the system, and a signal of the reckoning to come. The courtroom doors opened. All rise, Henderson's voice thundered. The room jolted to its feet. In that instant, justice walked back into the courtroom in the form of a black woman, Judge Kesha Williams. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Kesha Williams presiding. The announcement cracked like thunder. Martinez, lounging at the prosecution's table a second before, went rigid. His face flushed, then blanched, then went a sickly green in under half a minute. Harrison, sitting on a chair that was never his, went pale, jolted as if waking from a nightmare. Prosecutor Walsh's jaw fell open. The robing room door swung wide. Judge Kesha Williams stepped out, her black robe trimmed in gold glinting under the lights, her hand wrapped around the engraved gavel. She moved slowly, surely, like someone who had walked this path 1,000 times. Silence swallowed the room. Even the hum of the AC seemed loud. She took her rightful seat. Her eyes swept across face, slack jaws, dawning horror. Officer Martinez Kesha said, calm and heavy as stone, "Remain where you are." His knees trembled. He was on the verge of collapsing. "Your Honor." "Aye," Harrison stammered. "Thank you for covering in my absence." Kesha cut in, voice sharp but free of rancor. "You may return to your docket. I'll take it from here." Harrison nearly ran out, his robe flaring like a cape. Kesha turned, pinning Martinez. "Roughly 2 hours ago, you swore an oath and gave testimony. Do you recall your statements? He couldn't find his voice. "Let me help you," Kesha said, voice dropping a degree. "You said people like her always claim to be lawyers, judges, senators, just to dodge responsibility. Do you remember?" He nodded, lips quivering. "You also said I was a professional agitator, and that you'd seen this routine too many times." "Correct." The courtroom was so quiet the clerk's pen tapping sounded ominous. "And most memorably, Kesha said, leaning in. You said people like you need to learn one thing: every action has consequences. Isn't that right, officer? His legs buckled. Kesha pulled a tablet from beneath the bench. You're going to watch evidence that was just produced. The screen flickered. Security camera 7 appeared crystal clear, covering the courthouse steps. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps give light to voices that deserve to be seen and heard. The video showed Kesha walking calmly toward the entrance. Martinez stepped in front of her. His voice came through the speaker indisputable. Another rat from the slums, crawling in here. A collective gasp. Then his hand smashed across her face, his grip on her throat, the slam into stone, the cuffs, and the line that sealed his fate. Animals like you belong in cages. His words hissed through the room. People shot to their feet, horrified. A few jurors waiting for other cases slipped out, heads shaking. Do you hear me screaming, threatening? Kesha paused, the video voice razor sharp. Any obscenities from my mouth? Martinez said nothing, sweat pouring. And this, Kesha swiped to another file as the auto backup from your own body cam. You must have forgotten the system. The view switched to his eyeline. His voice came through acidic. This phony asterisk thinks she can walk straight into my courthouse. Time to teach another lesson. Walsh went sheet white fumbling papers as if she could curl up and disappear. Officers Rodriguez, Thompson, Kesha called, naming them cleanly. You both swore Martinez acted professionally. Would either of you like to amend your testimony? They glanced at each other and inched toward the door, faces chalky. And here Kesha went on, scrubbing to the moment of assault is where Officer Martinez committed felony battery against a federal judge. Those two words, federal judge, landed like a mallet. Martinez sagged, clinging to the prosecution table to stay upright. We're not done, Kesha said, almost conversational. We also have audio from Officer Thompson's body cam, which worked perfectly this morning. The speakers crackled. Thompson's voice snickered to Rodriguez, while the video showed Kesha being pinned. He's lost it this time. What if this lady actually is who she says she is? Rodriguez replied. Come on, look at her. Martinez knows what he's doing. She's probably just some welfare leech trying to shake the system. The room froze. The ugliness was naked. A few lingering officers chuckled on the recording as a federal judge was assaulted. But the rest of the gallery did not laugh. They stared at Martinez with revulsion. Kesha set the tablet down, eyes blazing. You asked for proof of my profession. Officer Martinez. There it is. She gestured to the judicial seal on the wall, the nameplate on the bench, the oil portrait in the main hall. I have presided in this courthouse for 23 years. Every case you've testified in, every warrant you've sought, every witness you've presented, all fell under my authority. Martinez trembled. Your Honor, I didn't know. Didn't know, Kesha enunciated each word. You didn't know because you didn't look. You saw a black woman and assumed she was lesser, voiceless. You chose to abuse power because you believed no one would stand up. She leaned forward slightly. But here's what you didn't know, Officer Martinez. The room held its breath. For 6 months, I've worked directly with the FBI's Civil Rights Division to investigate patterns of misconduct and racial bias in your department. And this morning, you handed us the best evidence any prosecutor could hope for. Sweat tracked down his temples. Kesha lifted the engraved gavel, her voice booming. You said every action has consequences. You were right. The court will recess to consider appropriate charges. Bang! The gavel cracked like thunder. Martinez collapsed into a chair, his career, reputation, and freedom dangling by a thread. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere had inverted. Word spread like wildfire. Hallways swelled with lawyers, staff guards, reporters, everyone buzzing about the great reversal. Martinez slumped at the defense table, now uniform, wrinkled face ashen. Beside him, a hastily appointed public defender, Michael Carter, shot him panicked glances. When Judge Williams strode back to the bench, her footsteps seemed to stamp into the floor. Eyes followed not out of curiosity but respect. Officer Martinez. Her voice rolled. Before we delve into the serious criminal charges you now face, I want everyone present to understand whom you assaulted this morning." She stepped from the dais and addressed the room. "I am Judge Kesha Williams. For 23 years I have presided here. I was appointed in 2001 by Governor Richardson and confirmed unanimously by the State Senate. I graduated with honors from Harvard Law School and served on the Harvard Law Review. Before taking the bench, I spent 8 years as a federal prosecutor focusing on civil rights violations, especially police misconduct." Her voice gathered force. "In that role, I successfully prosecuted 47 cases against abusive officers. And today, in the very building you called yours, I affirm justice has never belonged to abusers." Martinez's lawyer stopped writing, head bowed. Kesha opened a thick binder on the bench. "This is the docket of every case you've touched in 5 years. 43 cases, 28 involving defendants of color. In 26 of them, you were the arresting officer. And the language you used to describe them identical to today: resistant and stable. Threatening officers. Copy-pasted case after case. Boilerplate lies." She snapped the binder shut with a flat thud. "What you didn't know, Martinez," she said, voice low and hard, "is that the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the State Attorney General have been conducting a special investigation into you and your colleagues. Your name is on a watch list. Every call, every report, every arrest you've made has been analyzed." He turned to stone. Kesha stepped to the rail close enough to feel his panic. "And this morning, you gave us clear, irrefutable evidence of felony battery motivated by racial bias against a federal judge in the performance of her duties. You also committed perjury. This is not merely a career ending. It is the opening of a criminal case you will have to answer." She raised the gavel, voice ringing. "Justice does not close her eyes. Justice has seen everything." Bang, the strike sealed a historic moment. The gavel hovered in her hand. "Officer Martinez, earlier you asked whether I knew my place. Let me be clear, my place is in this chair in this room to ensure justice is done. My place is to make sure men like you pay when you abuse the power the people gave you." Bang. "And my place, Officer Martinez, is to make sure what you did this morning is the last time you wield racial violence under the color of a badge." The room held its breath. Martinez finally understood he hadn't just assaulted a black woman, he'd struck at justice itself. And justice knows how to answer. "Now let's review your distinguished record," Kesha said, opening another file. "In 15 years, you've had 47 formal complaints, an average of more than 3 a year. Complaint 1. 2009, Mrs. Rosa Delgado, 63, alleges you hurled slurs during a traffic stop, then slammed her face onto the hood for asking your badge number. Result: insufficient evidence." A rumble of anger rolled through the gallery. Complaint 2012, Jamal Washington, 17, honor student, alleges you planted drugs in his backpack because he wouldn't talk about his brother. Result: insufficient evidence. Complaint 2016, Dr. Michael Johnson, a cardiologist, handcuffed on his own front steps because you didn't believe a black man lived in that neighborhood. He was held 6 hours before counsel freed him. Result again: insufficient evidence. Martinez stared down, breath hitching. Kesha turned a page to charts. In 15 years, you made 1,251 arrests. 1,089, 87%, involved people of color. Meanwhile, in your patrol area, 42% white, 31% Hispanic, 27% black. What is this disparity, if not racial bias? Her laser pointer moved across bars. 63% of arrests of people of color involved force. For white arrestees, 12%. And the worst statistic of the 1,089 arrests of people of color, 432, were dismissed for lack of evidence, constitutional violations, or procedural misconduct. Nearly 40%. What do we call that, Officer Martinez? A criminal pattern? Pens of reporters skittered like rain. And there's more. In 15 years, this county has paid $2.3 million in settlements tied to your conduct. $2,300,000 more than the annual budget of many small towns. This isn't just abuse of power, it's a tax burden. My duty, he started weakly, Judge Kesha cut him off, voice like tempered steel. She lifted his oath of office and read aloud. I solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the state constitution faithfully, impartially, and to the best of my ability. So help me God. She set the paper down. Impartially, Martinez. Not selectively, not by skin color, not by personal prejudice. She turned to the room, voice resonant. What happened today isn't on Bad Apple. It reveals a system that enabled excused and buried complaints paid hush money instead of fixing rot. But that system failed the moment Martinez chose the wrong target. She faced him now, hunched under the weight. You told me people like me need to learn our place. Now you'll learn yours. She slammed the gavel. Your place is at the defendant's table, and you will sit there to face the full consequences of 15 years of misconduct. The gavel's crack rolled through the chamber like thunder. The gallery erupted in a stunned, tearful quiet. No applause, no laughter, just the collective understanding that they'd witnessed a turning point the moment justice stood up, wore the robe, and answered the morning's biggest question. What happens when someone with a badge believes he stands above the law? The answer sagged in the defendant's chair while justice spoke. For 15 years you violated this community. But today justice has seen it all. Across 15 years you turned your badge into a punchline. Kesha's voice hammered on. Your greatest mistake wasn't any single act of violence. Your greatest mistake was believing the system would always shield you no matter how far you went or how many lives you broke. He looked up, eyes red spent. This morning when you called me a filthy animal, when you pinned me to a wall, when you cuffed me and dragged me like a criminal, you thought you were asserting power over someone voiceless. You were wrong, Martinez. I was never powerless. Nor were the people you trampled. The only difference is that today, justice is here to witness. She drew herself up, voice majestic. Based on your own words, your own actions, your own camera, I find you guilty of first-degree assault. Guilty of assaulting a federal judge, minimum 5 years. Guilty of depriving rights under color of law, maximum 10 years. And guilty of perjury before this court. Each pronouncement detonated. Martinez shrank. His court-appointed counsel buried his face in his hands. But Martinez Kesha swept the room. This case isn't only about you. You are a symptom of a disease the system let fester. For too long, we allowed officers to act without accountability. For too long, we dismissed complaints, ignored evidence, and wrote checks instead of telling the truth. For too long, victims have been told their words don't matter. That ends today. A sob hiccuped out of Martinez. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean. Kesha's eyes softened for a beat, then held firm. Your apologies are 15 years and 47 complaints late. You're sorry because you picked the wrong target. Justice doesn't exist to protect the powerful. It exists to protect the people you preyed on. She lifted the engraved gavel. Today I speak not only for myself. I sentence on behalf of Mrs. Delgado, of Jamal, of Dr. Johnson, on behalf of hundreds you dismissed. I sentence on behalf of this entire community. Bang, Martinez, you are sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without parole. He crumpled a raw sound, scraping out into the charged silence. Kesha lowered the gavel, voice carrying, I hereby order a federal review of every case you touched. Those you silenced will get their voices back. Her final declaration rang, justice may be delayed, but justice is never blind. And sooner or later, justice arrives. Applause erupted, thundering for 5 minutes. The entire room stood not only for a verdict, but for a beginning. 6 months later, Martinez sat in federal lockup, gaunt. Badge, pension, freedom gone. His crimes had made national news. In prison, he was powerless, living in fear. But his collapse was only the start. The federal probe exposed a web of corruption inside the department. 12 officers fired 4 commanders, indicted the entire department, placed under federal oversight. Chief Judge Margaret Carter issued new rules. Any allegation of an officer assaulting a judicial officer would receive federal scrutiny. Body cams were mandatory with backups that could not conveniently fail. Public memory canonized that morning. People repeated a line etched into their minds. Justice may be slow, but justice arrives. Most important, the 432 cases Martinez had tainted were reopened. Dozens of wrongfully convicted people were freed. Hundreds more saw charges reduced or dismissed. The county paid another $8.7 million to his victims, money taken directly from the police budget. Judge Kesha Williams' name became a national symbol of integrity and courage in the judiciary. She spoke at law schools across the country, telling how one violent morning exposed a decade of systemic failure. Her message never wavered. Justice delayed is justice denied. But when justice is done, it is justice for all. The courthouse where it happened was renamed the Williams Federal Court of Justice. Outside, a brass plaque bore a simple seismic inscription. Here, justice finally found its voice. But the biggest change wasn't in brick and stone. It lived in the community. People once afraid to report police stepped into the light. A civilian oversight board formed. Police training was rewritten from scratch, with Kesha herself designing the curriculum on constitutional rights and implicit bias. The young law clerk who witnessed that morning, inspired by Kesha's courage, dedicated her career to civil rights. Today, she works at the ACLU, carrying that spirit into courtrooms nationwide. Rodriguez and Thompson, the enablers, were fired and federally charged with conspiracy and obstruction. The clip of them laughing while a federal judge was assaulted now appears in police academies as a textbook case of institutional decay. And the video of Kesha sentencing Martinez became the most watched courtroom recording in internet history, over 50 million views. Millions of comments poured in from people who had suffered injustice and had never seen such public, decisive, perfect redress. Now Martinez sits in federal prison. No badge, no power, no illusions. Perhaps he replays the most foolish moment of his life, the moment he believed he could humiliate a black woman because he assumed she was powerless. He thought he knew his place. He thought he knew hers. He was wrong. Justice doesn't just wear a blindfold. Sometimes justice wears a black robe. Sometimes justice holds a wooden gavel. And when the time comes, justice answers for herself. Judge Kesha Williams not only reclaimed her own voice, but also spoke for hundreds of people who had been forgotten in the shadows. And her message resonates to this day. No one in uniform or in a seat of power is above the law. And do you believe justice always finds a way, no matter how long it's hidden? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you believe everyone deserves justice, whoever they are, whatever they look like, share this story. Tap. Like if you want more tales of courage toppling corruption. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because stories like this are unfolding every day, and the next one might be yours.